Yesterday, my friends and I were hanging out, so we met up in my driveway. We'd been sitting around for quite some time, and eventually one of us just said, let's just go somewhere. And nobody had an answer as to where we wanted to go. So we just hopped on our bikes, no plan, no idea where we wanted to go. We just left. And we ended up at this really nice park, right? Hung around for a bit, played a game of pickup basketball, which we got smoked, and then got ice cream, rode around a bit more on our bikes, and eventually we all went our separate ways back home. So nothing too crazy happened. But when I got home, I remember thinking, why was that so much fun? We didn't do anything special. We just rode around and let that adventure follow. And the more I thought about it, the stranger this whole thing seemed. Because where I live, doing something that simple feels kind of unusual. Usually, if my friends and I want to go somewhere, it's this whole big process, right? Where are we going? Who's driving? Can someone's parents take us? How long would it be on bike? What time do we have to be back home? And suddenly hanging out with your friends just becomes this huge logistical problem. And that's definitely not normal. But it's become so normalized. And for me, that's a big issue. I've always thought suburbia was just like so ugly. I've lived in suburban America my whole life. And it just looks so disgusting to me. I just envision it in your head right now. You drive down a road and it's 6 lanes across, right? There's a giant parking lot. Then there's another giant parking lot. Then there's this ugly gray monotone strip mall. Then there's another road. And somehow this is supposed to be the center of community. Like, maybe I'm being a little too harsh and unfair right now, but why do we build this way? And that's a question I've thought about for such a long time. And I always thought it was just an aesthetic complaint on my end, right? I like older looking buildings. I like dense cities. I think European streets are pretty cool, whatever. But I've started realizing that the ugliness isn't really what bothers me, but it's what the ugliness does. Any relevant place that me and my friends could go is about 4 miles from my house. 4 miles. We can easily bike that. But if my friends and I wanted to go there, suddenly we'd have to figure out who could drive us or how long that bike ride would take. And this happens constantly. Like, it's happened every single day this summer. And you don't notice this thing when you've grown up in it and you've grown up with it. You just learn that if you want to go somewhere, you get in a car. And it's kind of strange to think that I'm surrounded by thousands of people, restaurants, parks, stores, everything. And yet I can't access most of it without a machine that weighs several thousand pounds. That's just so bizarre. And the thing is, I don't even think this is primarily a transportation issue, but it's a social problem. Because if going anywhere requires a car, then going anywhere requires planning. And when everything requires planning in your life, you stop doing just those random things. And that's what I always liked about the bike ride, right? When we got on our bikes, we didn't have a set destination. We just went wherever we wanted to go. And that's what I liked. We could just turn down a different street, stop somewhere, see something, change our minds, right? We didn't have to decide exactly what we wanted to do or where we were going to go that afternoon before we left our houses. And I guess that sounds pretty insignificant, but I'm starting to think it isn't, because how much of your life is actually spontaneous? Not spontaneous in the sense of doing something insane, just like something you didn't plan. You walk somewhere and you run into someone from school, or you hear music and you stop. You see a bunch of people gathered somewhere and you decide to mingle with them. So, like, that stuff doesn't happen very often when your entire environment is built around getting from one destination to another. Where I think the usual argument misses something is that people say suburbs are boring because there's nothing to do in the suburbs. But I don't think that's true. There's plenty to do, right? I have more entertainment in my hands than any teenager in history, right? I can watch YouTube all day. I can play games, doom scroll my day away. I can watch movies, text people, order food. I can entertain myself indefinitely without ever having to leave the comfort of my room. So why does it still feel like there's nowhere to go and nothing to do? Probably because I'm kind of confusing entertainment with community, because those aren't the same thing. But I don't want another place to just consume something. I want somewhere where people are, somewhere I can sit around without needing a reason to be there. Maybe there's a basketball game going on. Maybe someone is performing on a stage or whatever. Maybe my friends are there. Maybe I don't know anyone. Maybe nothing happens at all, and that's okay, right? Because I think there's just a value in simply being around other people. But then where is this community supposed to happen, right? We talk about community constantly. People say Americans don't know their neighbors anymore. People are lonely. People don't have the same social connections that they used to have. Okay, but where is that community actually supposed to happen? Think about a normal day in the suburbs, right? You wake up, you go to school, get in your car, maybe go to work, do your homework, and maybe go somewhere else, then come back home, fall asleep, repeat. I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with that, but look at how much of your life happens in private. There's your house and your friend's house. There's your car. There's that business across the street. Then there's home. And there's very little in between, right? And maybe that's important because we're social creatures, but we don't just need our closest friends. We need to see other people too, right? Your strangers, like the strangers you see on the street, they matter, right? Think about walking around a big city. You see somebody walking their dog. There's some old guys sitting on a bench. There's a couple of kids playing soccer or whatever. Someone's riding a bike. You probably don't know any of them. You don't talk to any of them, but you see, you notice. And I think that matters more than we realize because when you're always inside with in your own little bubble, your world gets so much smaller, right? You know your friends, you know your family, you know some of the dudes at your school. That's basically your entire universe. But when you move through a public space, you're constantly reminded that there are other people living completely different lives, different ages, different interests, different hobbies, different issues, different ways of seeing the world. You don't have to interact with all those people, but just seeing them is enough to remind you that your life isn't the entire world. And I think we've just underestimated that so much. So what does the car have to do with any of this? And this is where I started thinking more seriously about cars, right? And I want to be clear. I love cars. I'm going to own my own car when I'm older. Being able to get in a car and go wherever you want is incredible. And I'm not trying to ban cars, but the problem is when a car stops being an option and it starts being a requirement, right? There's a huge difference between cars are useful and you can't really participate in normal life without one. Because once you need a car, the entire environment starts adapting around the car. Roads get wider, destinations get farther apart, parking lots get bigger, walking just becomes so much more inconvenient, right? And eventually, nobody even thinks about it anymore, right? You don't ask, why is the grocery store 5 miles away from my house? You just drive to the grocery store, right? I fell down this rabbit hole and I started looking into how America actually got here. And I thought I knew the entire story already, right? America had streetcars, then cars became popular. GM killed the streetcar, suburbs happened, end of story. But that's just way too simple. There really was a complicated history involving companies like General Motors buying streetcar systems and replacing some with buses. And there were criminal convictions related to monopolizing the sale of buses and equipment. But the idea that one company secretly decided to destroy American cities is obviously not the whole story, right? It was bigger than that. Highways expanded, suburbs expanded outwards, and people could live further away from work. So businesses could move further away from the neighborhoods. And over time, just owning a car became the default. Not just something you owned, but it was something that you needed. And once you need a car to participate in normal life, that whole environment starts being built around that assumption. One person who really got me interested in this was Robert Moses. He had an enormous amount of influence over New York City's infrastructure and pushed major highway projects through the city. And Jane Jacobs fought him on that. And what I find interesting about Jane Jacobs is that she wasn't just opposed to highways. It's that she had a completely different way of what a city actually was. It wasn't just the roads there. It wasn't just the buildings, but it was the people there, right? The people walking around, sitting outside, seeing each other, people watching what was happening. Because at first, I didn't really understand this whole obsession around walkability. I have a car. If the grocery store is like 5 miles away, so what? What's the big deal? I'll just drive there. But I think I was just looking at the whole thing wrong, right? Walking isn't really the point. What happens because people can walk is the point, right? You can leave your house without having to decide exactly where you're going. You can run into someone, change your mind, wander around somewhere for no particular reason. And I'm starting to think that this whole no reason thing is pretty important. I've been thinking about this idea of accidental life where some of the best experiences you have aren't even planned, right? They're just things that happen to you. You run into someone, you discover some new place, you hear something, you end up somewhere you weren't expecting to be. And none of that is particularly efficient though, right? And that's why I like it. You can't optimize every single meaningful experience in your life. Sometimes you need to leave room for randomness. And I think our environment has gotten very good at removing randomness, right? Everything has a destination. You get in a car, you drive there, you park, you go inside, you leave, you drive home. It's so incredibly efficient. But like, where's the life in any of this? right? And there's a term for the kind of place I'm describing. There's a term for the kind of place I'm describing. The third place, right? Home is one place, school or work is another place. Then there's somewhere else where people gather together, right? A park, a library, public square or something. And I think suburban America has such a weird relationship with these places because technically we do have them, but a lot of the time they're businesses, right? You can go get coffee there, you can go shopping there, you can go eat there, but eventually somebody wants your money. So where do you go where you don't want to buy anything? Where does a teenager go when they just want to be around people? Where can you sit for 3 hours and nobody cares, right? And that's the part I think we're missing. But public space isn't hard. Now, obviously, this isn't some magical solution, but public spaces have a lot of problems. You have to maintain them. You have to make people feel safe. You have to deal with homelessness, which is obviously a big issue. You have to deal with people who cause problems. I don't have any perfect answers for any of that. I'm 15. I'm not some sort of urban planner. But I also don't think that the difficulty of managing a public space means we should barely have any public space, because if people want to have community, we need somewhere for that community to actually exist. And it's not just teenagers, right? Teenagers are the easiest example, but we're old enough to want independence, but we're not old enough to drive yet, or most of us aren't old enough to drive yet. But think about someone who's elderly, or someone who can't drive, or someone who simply can't afford a car. Suddenly, that 5 mile distance becomes a completely different problem, right? Because technically it's close, but functionally it's just so far away. And that's one of the weirdest things about car-dependent places. They can look so connected on the map, right? So incredibly connected on a map while being completely disconnected. I don't hate suburbia, and I don't want this to become one of those cities are good, suburbia is bad, and it sucks videos, because that's just such a boring argument, right? There are things I generally like about the suburbs. I like having a lot of space, the backyard, being able to get away from people sometimes. Some people generally want that, and that's completely fine. I don't think everyone needs to live in New York City, but I think we've convinced ourselves that there are only two options, really. You either live in suburbia or you live in downtown Manhattan, right? There's an entire middle ground. You can have houses, you can have backyards, you can have cars, and you can still have neighborhoods where you can walk somewhere, where you can run into people, sit outside, where you can actually feel like you're somewhere. So coming back to the ugliness, and that's why I think this ugliness bothers me so much, right? I always thought I hated parking lots and these giant roads, the strip malls, and I think I finally understand why. It's not that they're ugly, but it's because of what they represent, right? Everything is just separated. My house is there. My friend's house is 3 miles away. That restaurant is somewhere else. That park is somewhere else. And there's just this enormous road that connects all of it. And if you have a car, that's great. If you don't, good luck, right? Eventually you stop asking, where can I go? And you start asking, who can drive me? I don't want to get rid of cars. I want every American city to look like Paris. I don't want to bulldoze the suburbs. I just want more places where the car isn't necessary. I want to be able to walk outside, get on my bike, and have no idea what I'm going to encounter. Maybe I'll see somebody I know. Maybe I'll just find something happening, get some ice cream. I'll just ride around for an hour and accomplish absolutely nothing. And that's just fine with me, because there's something really nice about knowing that something could happen. And I think that's what's been missing. Not entertainment, not another mall or shopping center, just possibility. I just want to walk out of my house and have something unexpected happen, because maybe that's what a city's supposed to do. Not just get you where you're going, but give you somewhere worth going. That's all the more I have for you guys today. Catch you in the next episode.